I have now been in the tech industry that unfortunately has fairly poor representation, possibly worse than kind of many other ones. I have seen the change over the last 10, 15 years. The percentages have moved, and they have moved by modest amount, like I'm talking single digit, 1 or 2%. However, it is an improvement. And what has certainly moved more than the numbers themselves is the discourse and the narrative and people's understanding of why this matters and what we need to do to fix it. So I'm cautiously hopeful.
Now and then, we get a guest on to the Tech Leaders podcast that we like to shout from the rooftops and tell everybody about. This is definitely one of those moments. Milena Nikolic is the CTO of Trainline.com. As a young lady growing up in Serbia, Milena was always attracted to a career in technology. So when an opportunity arose to join Google, who were a powerhouse then, let alone now, and also to join Google in London, this was back in 2008, Milena jumped at the chance. And fast forward 15 years, she is now the CTO of travel aggregator giant Trainline.com, one of the most recognized tech company brands, certainly in Britain, if not in Europe. We covered everything from the recipe to successful delegation through to the HS2 debacle, what it really means to be a chief technology officer, female representation in the boardroom, something that Milena is very passionate about, and much, much more. A lovely lady, fantastic interview, so driven, so knowledgeable. This is what the Tech Leaders podcast is all about. I hope you enjoy it. It's Milena Nikolic. Milena, thank you so much for coming on the Tech Leaders podcast. I've been in excited anticipation of this day, and I've been really looking forward to talking to you. The CTO of Trainline.com. How are you today in London? Having your garden done by the sounds of it, yeah?
Yes, I am. And no, thank you, Gareth, for inviting me. Very happy to be here. Looking forward to the conversation.
Yeah, fantastic. So much to talk about. Trainline.com, are you sort of a 2-3 split now? Do you work from home every Friday? What have you guys implemented post-COVID in terms of remote office split?
We have actually just announced this to the team a couple of weeks ago. We are doing an approach we're calling Flexi First, which is 40% over 12 weeks. We expect people to be in the office, so it's not quite 2 days a week.
Yeah.
It's kind of more average approach. We are really very excited to be still banking on the flexibility that kind of we were all getting from working from home. However, we also want to be spending some more time together, which is very important. So that is our approach. 40% over 12 weeks.
Wow, that's very specific. No, I like that though. Like most organizations that I'm aware of are either totally remote, totally back in the office, or a 2-3 or 3-2 split. So that's refreshing. I think organizations will become more mature in terms of how they do this going forward, doesn't it? But it sounds like you guys are ahead of the game. So congratulations on that. But let's start with the question we always start with. Really looking forward to asking you this one, actually. What does good leadership mean to you, Milena?
I would say leadership has to be in the with a purpose, in the aim of something. So I think that's one of the key things. So just kind of driving towards a goal, having an opinion, having a vision. So I think that's very key. And then certainly efficiency is a point that comes to it, kind of like reaching the goal in a way that's optimal and efficient. And then finally, with taking others on the journey, so sort of taking the people and the team aspect in mind. So when I think about leadership, I always think about the kind of the purpose, the vision, the kind of having something to stand for, getting there in the most optimal and efficient way, and taking the team on a journey with you.
Yeah, fantastic answer. I think I completely agree with that. It's about having that setting that clear purpose and aligning a team towards that purpose. There's an art to that, isn't it? It's a difficult thing to do well. You've obviously done a very good job. You spent 12 years at Google, ended up in a very senior leadership position. So can you tell us a little bit about how you come to work for Google? I know you joined in 2008, is that correct? As a software engineer, and you quickly went up the ranks there and ended as an engineering director. Talk us through that experience, how you joined Google and what you learned from working for that organization.
So I joined Google as an intern while I was still at the university, just for kind of a summer internship program, and kind of, I guess, did okay in that internship. So they offered me a new grad full-time job once I graduated. And that's when I moved to London. I started as a new grad software engineer and did that over many years, over many Google products. So I've done some work on Google Search. I've done plenty of infrastructural work that eventually translated into Google Cloud. And then for many years I was on Android and Google Play. Absolutely loved writing code. I loved designing systems. I loved everything about being an engineer, and engineer at various different levels, from
Yeah.
junior, mid, senior, kind of all the way up to staff. And was never particularly attracted to moving into some sort of leadership position until Google reached the stage where it was growing very fast. So a lot of people were joining, and I started to realize that the hard problems we're dealing with are actually people problems and not technology problems at that stage. That was the time when I decided to give kind of management a go and just see how it goes. And sort of to my own surprise, I ended up liking it. I liked getting more from the teams than they would have if I weren't there. I love them land impact and kind of make a difference in a meaningful way. And of course, I love building people, helping them to grow their career, and more than anything, building teams into kind of coherent and productive units in that sense. So kind of then stayed in leadership roles the rest of my career. I was engineering manager, then senior engineering manager, and then eventually director and senior director at Google. And then yeah, kind of that sort of, so yeah, building productive tech organizations is kind of what I see as my job and mission and purpose now.
If you were to sort of, when reflecting back on your time with Google now, what were the biggest lessons you learned there, do you think, that you've taken into your role with Trainline.com?
So engineering culture and the culture needed to build products and kind of to make a meaningful difference with technology is probably kind of the biggest one thing. If I have to single something out, I don't take the world culture easily because I think it's being thrown around as one of those just glue words that very often doesn't actually have a lot of backing. But
Yeah.
for me, there is the sort of fine line between of how different functions within software development teams interact and operate, and who's accountable for what and who's responsible,
Mm.
and how do you incentivize everyone in that group to really want to do the right thing for the business, kind of through technology. So I could to work on the right thing, to work in the most efficient way. So I think some of those core aspects of organizing work and incentivizing people to care about the right things, be that the quality of the software that they make, the quality of the product that they build, the metrics that are trying to drive, kind of all of those aspects. I think that was probably one of the biggest lessons, and it's not to be taken for granted. I think
Yeah.
in a lot of more well, maybe not so digitally native tech organizations, very often tech teams are treated as an implementation arm of the business. So kind of just someone code monkeys that you throw the problem back to, just to kind of to build it out. And I'm a big believer in kind of tech teams needing to have an opinion and needing to be part of deciding what's being done rather than just implementing it, as well as driving innovation and kind of all of that good stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. So looking back now then, what would you change about your time with Google?
Oh dear, good question. I had very many years where I work hard, which have no regrets about, would not change that. Like, I think, we all have periods in our career when we work very hard, and then when we figure out ways to work smart and kind of all that. The bit that I would change is that I was I didn't really trust the system and the journey, and I was just getting very frustrated with quite a lot of things. And I'm generally an opinionated person, so kind of like I would see something and I'd be like, that's not right, and that's not what we should be investing in, and
Mm.
this is not how we should be building things. And it's like, and I think my heart was always in the right place. And I think I quite often actually had a point with what I was trying to say. Not always, but quite often I had a point with I was kind of what I was trying to say and drive. But I shouldn't have let those things affect me as much and just get me to the point where I'm unhappy and frustrated, and kind of on a number of occasions having been like, I'm gonna quit because this is
Yeah.
complete like nonsense. It doesn't make sense. It took me quite a few years to build out the resilience and perspective to take a step back and say like, interesting, I disagree with this, but I just have to go about it in a very constructive way and not let it affect me and kind of and make me upset or agitated or miserable or kind of
Sure.
any of it. So I think that would generally be kind of my kind of, if I could change and if I could come back and tell myself a couple of years into a career,
Mm.
do something differently, that would be the thing. Thing would be trust the process and just kind of bring yourself into that constructive place rather than
Yeah, I think a lot of people will empathize with that because I think a lot of people look back, and I know certainly I'm no exception. Looking back earlier in your life, and you sort of identify times when you probably should have just taken a longer term view. You know what I mean? We think in very short term way when you're younger, don't you? It's like what's going to affect me today, what's going to have impact today. When your career is a lot longer than that, isn't it? So yeah, no, that's a
it's
really really good
exactly
point.
that.
I
Yeah.
wanted to ask you about innovation. Google is renowned for having a very innovative culture. They were quite groundbreaking in the. I don't know the correct terminology for this, but I understand there was a kind of like a personal projects were encouraged. And can you talk us through that? I know some amazing applications have come from this culture, like Google Pay and some of the most amazing, impactful Google products of all, like Google Maps or whatever. But can you talk us through what exactly that was and how that experience was for you personally?
So yes, there is a concept at Google of 20% time, and it's not one day a week or even any particular kind of time in that sense. It's just the idea that as an employee, you can spend 20% of your overall time at work doing something that you believe will make a difference and is important. And
Sure.
it can be related to the main team or project you're working on, or it could be a completely green field, new idea, new product, new productivity tool, kind of whatever you think makes a difference in that sense. And yes, quite a lot of innovation came out of it. I also remember my time when I was a manager of the team, and kind of like, to be perfectly honest, it was frustrating that kind of at the times we were trying to ship and build a kind of something. Really big as a team, if bunch of people would choose to use their 20% time around kind of those big dates. So you kind of, these things always just have come with pros and cons. You just kind of want to be balanced in the assessment. I do think it's brave for a company to choose to delegate autonomy
Yeah.
to sometimes most junior people in terms of how they spend their time. I do think Google got quite a lot of value out of it in the early days, and then I think as it grew in scale, that math may have changed a little bit, and then I think the guidance for 20% time also changed a little bit. But again, it was yeah, one of those staples of early day digital native tech companies and kind of how they were thinking for sure.
Can I ask you about delegation? It's an aspect of leadership which I think is dramatically underrated. People who can delegate well can do anything, can't they? I mean, it's such a superpower. How do you delegate well, Milena? What's the key to successful delegation?
I really try hard at when I delegate to make sure that the person has accountability for what they're picking up. So I
Yeah,
think that's the sort of I'm there to support, and kind of in my role as a manager, as a leader, I'm there to coach, I'm there to support. But it is very clear for a person to understand that they're getting accountability to deliver something. The flip side of that, they're also getting the empowerment, they're getting the support, they're getting you have their back as a leader. You give them this amazing opportunity, but ultimately they're accountable for the results. So that's kind of how I think about it. And then one other thing that I always try to kind of bring into the equation is, there was an old colleague of mine who made this metaphor, this kind of comparison of the work we do as leaders in technology to the work that athletics coach would do. So for example, someone who helps you train, your, let's say, lifting coach would only ever allow you to lift what's appropriate for you to build muscle, but not to hurt yourself. But equally, they wouldn't let you lift too little, because that might mean that you're not really building the muscle.
yeah,
So just kind of when I delegate, I always try to keep that in my head of like, what is the appropriate weight I'm putting on this person?
yeah.
I don't want to give them something that doesn't help them grow, but equally, I don't want them to hurt themselves, so to speak, kind of by giving them too much. So I think those are probably two aspects of delegation that I tend to think about.
I love that. That's a brilliant analogy. You know what? I've used a similar analogy to that for burnout as well. You know, like you got to give your brain a rest every now and again, sort of thing. I've used that in that context. I've not used it in this context. I think that's a really interesting analogy. I might actually have to steal that one, Milena. But thank you for sharing.
Sure, you can have it, Garrett.
Thank you for sharing that. I think delegation is such an important one. I want to stay on the theme of your past and go back to the beginning, really. And I suppose the question I was going to ask was, how does a girl from Serbia end up in the UK? Can you talk us about and how to end up working in the tech sector in the UK specifically? Can you talk us through why you got into the tech space and how you ended up in the UK?
Oh God, it was so long ago. Let me try to remember. I think I was always. It's kind of fairly canonical path. I would say almost boring in the sense that I was always good at maths, and I very early I got into maths competitions and physics competitions, and then into programming reasonably early as well, and into coding competitions and that kind of like. So that was kind of very canonical path in the sense that I was developing algorithms when I was 15 or 16, or kind of yeah, effectively something along those lines.
Sure.
When I studied, I think I was applying to various internships, work placements, kind of effectively stuff of that nature. And Google had a very open application process. I sent my application, not really actually seriously thinking that I'll have any chance of them inviting me, and they did. Then I interviewed over the phone, and apparently I did well. So kind of they brought me over to London to do internship again. That went well, and I sort of I came back to move. I fell in love with London. I love the city. I love the vibe, and I was sort of like, oh, I think this is kind of a place for me. And ultimately, professionally, I wanted to go somewhere where I'm going to be challenged and just do the job at the highest levels of what is possible to be doing, kind of in the sense of, yeah, just kind of building cool things and shipping stuff to millions or hundreds of millions of users. So I think all of those things sort of came together to get me on the path of technical leadership and living life in where I am right now.
What was the biggest cultural shock for you when you come to the UK between the UK and Serbia? What was like, oh my god, what the hell is that? Was there anything? Any?
Very good.
What was that? What was your biggest surprise?
Well, like I thought my English was very good, having spent a lot of it like on the, just online and having watched a lot of movies and stuff like that. And oh my God, like British accent was, I was like, oh my God, I'm genuinely struggling to understand this. And more than anything, I'm, struggling to express myself in the way that I was used to. So that was obviously language barrier was a big challenge, even though, I thought of myself as fluent in English even before I moved. Culturally, purely probably queuing, politeness. It's kind of like I think in
I
Balkans we
love
do
queuing.
things a little bit differently. Yeah,
Yeah.
we do things a bit differently. But yeah, it's kind of now I've been localized here to the local manners. So kind of when I go back to the old home, it's always a bit more of a shock the other way.
Yeah, man. I just wanted to maybe skip forward now then and talk about your experience of joining Trainline.com. I understand the organization's been going for a lot longer than I thought, actually. It was set up by Virgin Group, I believe, originally. It's been a bit of a journey since then, but it's certainly an app that I use regularly, and I think it's a household name in the UK for sure. How did that opportunity come about? And talk us through why you joined Trainline.
Yeah, as you said, the trailer has been around for 25 years. It actually building technology for quite a few of those years, and that's for better or worse now, as I kind of have a lot of very modern tech stack, but also have
Yeah.
some parts of the tech surface that have been around for a while. But yeah, so having been at Google for more than a decade, at some stage, I just got an itch to move on, and there was nothing I needed to run away from. It was a great company, took really good care of me, but at some stage, I just really wanted to see if I can add value somewhere else, if I can learn somewhere else. I'm just really itching to try something different. And we're very fortunate in London, or as a matter of fact, as a tech world in many cities, that there was plenty of choice. And I spoke to dozens of different companies. I was really exploring what feels right as kind of as the next opportunity. There was always something missing. Either company was great, but a role wasn't quite right, or company and role were great, but I wasn't as impressed with people, or kind of like a lot of different
Mm.
kind of different circumstances. And then Trainline came along and sort of everything really just clicked. So this is going to sound a little bit cheesy, but I really like the mission. So I love connecting people to places in a greener, more sustainable way. I'm deeply concerned about the climate change. If there is anything at all I can do to help make a difference with it in my 9 to 5, and like rail being the greenest form of transport that we have, that was something that really resonated, was deeply meaningful for me. And then on top of that, I was also a user of the product. I liked it, and at the same time, also felt, kind of there is even more we can do. I saw it both as something that's successful and good, that has plenty of users, and of course has a proven business model, and kind of is a actual company that I don't have to worry about will it be able to pay the bills in a year or two. But at the same time, I could see that it can be so much more. So the opportunity felt right, the product felt right, and then more than anything, I was so impressed with people, the CEO and my boss, my product counterpart, chief people officer, so many fantastic leaders that I had a lot to learn from. So yeah, kind of everything fell into place, and I just been having fantastic last two and a bit years.
What sort of engineering and technical challenges have really sort of excited you since you've joined? You know what I mean? Are you able to talk us through any significant change that you've taken the organization through from a technology standpoint?
The thing that was not obvious to me before I joined was, where does the complexity lie in this space? And one of the key examples is rail travel is different to all the other forms of travel because of the traffic patterns and because how you do it. Quite a few companies have solved this air travel aggregation or hotel aggregation type problems, but rail is harder because there are about 1,000 times more train stations in Europe than there are airports. So just the scale of the problem, especially obviously the combinatorial complexity of that is just kind of orders of magnitude higher. And then traffic patterns are very different. Whereas you would book your airplane ticket weeks in advance, sometimes months in advance, very many of our users, the double digit percentage of our users, are buying tickets as they walk into a train station, as they're approaching barrier gates. So for us, that makes for some very interesting morning commute peaks and afternoon commute peaks to a lesser degree, but certainly morning commute peaks, which are very, very interesting technical challenge we have to deal with. But equally, the requirement to fulfill a ticket, to give users that barcode they can scan on the barrier gates as a matter of seconds, or very often under a second from the moment they buy, which is not the case for so many of the bookings related to, well, almost anything else, almost anything you buy online. Company can have hours to fulfill your order, to send you either the ticket or to ship stuff to you. So just this immediacy of transaction combined with the scale, combined with the traffic patterns kind of that follow the sun, so to say. So those are just technically some of the challenges. So keeping services up and running through what has been, significant growth in our traffic post COVID has been like a very interesting, just core technical challenge. So kind of enabling scale and reliability has been one of the key things. And then there are obviously many other things of kind of moving to the next generation of cloud and so on, kind of as we do that. But I think this is where it really kind of the challenge. Hopefully, kind of you get to see where the challenge really comes to life.
Can you give us an idea of what sort of I don't know how you would measure it, but in terms of transaction volume, I'm assuming Trainline.com, the transaction volume is insane. Can you give us an idea of what the transaction volume looks like, and what technology and engineering challenge does that pose to Trainline.com going forward? Maybe you can go into the cloud stuff you were talking about.
Yeah, for sure. So we do more than 1,000 transactions per minute at peak time. So that's kind of, which is
Wow.
really really pretty
Yeah.
significant. And certainly even something with my putting my Google hat from back in the day. It's something that is respectable, because obviously our people who are just checking train times and coming into our app, or kind of getting tickets, is even higher, significantly higher. But just the transaction and ticket fulfillment, which is the obviously most intensive and the mission critical part of what we're serving, is kind of more than 1,000 per minute, which is quite significant.
Just to clarify, is that UK or is that European wide?
Let's say that would be global, and things do look different on kind of different days or times. We see our European peaks and we see our kind of British peaks. But for example, earlier this week we had SNCF, the main train operator in France, was doing a significant sale over which, and I don't want this to sound as some sort of Schadenfreude, but their services went down because they were doing the massive big Christmas sale and everyone was trying to buy through them. Their services went down, Trainline stayed up, and just on that we were dealing with 600-700 transactions per minute, just just in France. So obviously, this looks different in kind of in different countries, but very regularly globally, we like daily really, we handle more than 1,000 transactions per minute.
That's a lot. Just in terms of the technology challenges, then, how do you see Trainline dealing with that kind of level of transactions growing in the future? What is your sort of contingency plan for growth from a technology standpoint?
So the one of the big transformations we're doing right now is we're moving from sort of, I guess, what was cloud 1.0 to what cloud is now. So Trainline has moved the cloud fairly early, something like 7, 8 years ago, which was very good at the time. It was kind of a little bit at the forefront. It was the right thing to do. However, cloud 7 or 8 years ago was very different to what cloud is today. In a way, we effectively ended up shipping bunch of services from on-prem kind of data centers to EC2 instances in AWS, and really only now we're kind of starting to adopt the latest generation of cloud that kind of started to emerge in the last couple of years, which is containers and cloud native databases rather than relational databases hosted in kind of in EC2 and so on. So that's one of those things that I think will give us planetary scale,
Yeah.
so to speak. It's kind of like infinitely horizontally scalable services.
I find that stuff fascinating, but I'm sure you've got plans to modernize the infrastructure there. So just staying on the topic of Trainline, then it's an organization obviously that has been around for a long time. I'm just wondering what you guys are doing to modernize your service delivery to your customers and things like that. And I'm specifically want to point this towards AI. What kind of conversations are you having at board level in Trainline at the moment to benefit from AI technology?
It's certainly something we're looking at. Generative AI has so much potential, and
Yeah,
myself as a technologist personally, I'm very excited about it. And of course, the leadership team at Trainline is very excited about it as well. It's a really interesting challenge. We already use machine learning fairly extensively, kind of, and there's so many good things we're doing, like split save and price prediction, and kind of a lot of our consumer features that are already driven by machine learning and that form, that paradigm of machine learning.
just to be clear, split save is the one whereby instead of buying a ticket from Cardiff to London, you'd buy a ticket from Cardiff to Swindon, and then a ticket from Swindon to London, which would work out cheaper. Is it
Exactly.
that
That
function? Yeah,
exactly is
that's
split save.
great. That is, by the
Yes.
way.
Yeah. Yeah. I know. We
Yeah,
get a lot of positive feedback on it. And, I think the best thing is that obviously users don't have to do that manual work. They buy a single ticket and we just kind of split the thing on their behalf. And,
sure.
kind of very often they don't even have to move the seat in the train. And that's kind of helpful in that way. So, yeah, it's kind of quite a few of these machine learning driven and kind of big data driven features already. So we kind of, in a way, we see generative AI as an enhancement of that. And where I think, and my Mike Hyde, my chief data officer, can talk to you in a kind of much more, I would say, extensive and compelling way. But like the way we think about generative AI is sort of something that can solve broader, more complex problems rather than machine learning, where I think machine learning is exceptional right now in kind of given a set of inputs and a very clear expected output, usually like a classifier style or kind of the vector machine style output. That problem is solved and cater very well with the current paradigm of AI. With LLMs, we're really hoping to get into kind of more complex problems, which could be something like, I'm coming from US with a family of four and we have 2 weeks. We want to do journey across Europe on trains. Tell us where to go and kind of recommend itineraries with specific trains and kind of like
Yeah,
this, something that's just simply less constrained in the nature. And we're looking at a lot of aspects of this, mainly things like, or kind of among other things, can we build UIs that are not purely chatbots or plugins to other chatbots? Can we
yeah.
use the reasoning of LLMs and generative AI to drive the experience in a way that I would say still comes more naturally to users, which is clicking on kind of the parts of the screen on a mobile phone. And yeah, we're already kind of having some early success. Whereas I don't have anything to announce today, I'm hoping kind of over the coming months there will be kind of a first release in our app that uses some of this technology.
Yeah, for sure. How have you managed to, in terms of like attract the right talent to keep Trainline at the forefront with this type of thing. Do you typically hire from the market and hire experienced people, or do you have more of a policy of growing your own? How do you develop talent for your team, Milena?
Yeah, I this is deeply important for me because as someone who stayed in one company for more than a decade and was,
Yeah.
promoted 6 or 7 times, whatever it was, I deeply believe it's important to give people a chance in a company to advance and to grow and kind of to give them that career ladder. So it's kind of a little bit of everything you said. Of course, we hire from the market, like I think fresh blood and new perspectives, and
Yeah.
people who have done jobs successfully elsewhere. I think that is important to a certain degree for sure. But equally, it's important to have retention rate on the team that's high enough that the critical knowledge, domain knowledge, and systems knowledge is being retained, so that people can stay, can still advance, can continue to learn, and continue kind of to contribute and sort of force multiply their contributions because they've been around for longer and they know the people, they know the stack, they know the domain, and so on. Did quite a few different things, to be honest. Like, a lot of my time does go on activities related to this with the team. We have recently redefined our career progression ladders to extend our individual contributor ladder beyond senior into staff and senior staff and eventually distinguished, which kind of puts senior engineers, senior individual contributors on par with directors if their impact is commensurate with that.
Meritocracy and developing talent is just so, like mobility is so important, isn't it? You know what I mean? No, that's a really good answer. I'm glad to hear it. There's loads of directions we could go in with that, but I really want to ask you about something. And apologies if this is like not something you really care about, but what do you think about HS2 getting scrapped? Did you guys think about? Did you discuss that much at Trainline.com? Was there any? Does it? Do you have an opinion on it? Or
Yeah, frankly, right now there is quite a lot going on for us in terms of strategy planning for next year, and performance review cycle for kind of everyone on my team, and kind of like a lot of other exciting things in terms of what we're actually building for customers and shipping and all that. So
yeah,
whereas I know certain parts of the team and organization are looking into aspects like this, like infrastructural development in the UK as well as our key markets in Europe, like France, Italy, and Spain, it's not something that I kind of sweat day to day. So like I don't
yeah.
have anything, particularly interesting to say on it.
We talked about AI earlier on. Obviously, you're a technologist at heart. It's in your blood, you know? What technology innovation, and it doesn't have to be related to your role, it can just be in general. What technology innovation in the world right now, Milena, are you most excited about?
Oh, very good. So I bet everyone talks to you about generative AI, kind of all that. So I will spare you that just for now. Where I'm actually very excited is kind of biotechnology, and I would say sensors, if anything else. Like, I feel that field is developing quite a lot, and it's really helping us, in terms of improving our health and leading healthier lives, but also just really getting more out of technology. I think with sort of says, everything that's now being put into wearables and kind of
Yeah.
getting information out of that. I think that's probably where I would be kind of most excited.
So, in terms of the bespoke data that comes from wearables specifically, is really exciting, isn't it? Like in terms of longer,
Exactly.
like sleep analysis, for example, is amazing, isn't it? I don't know if you're into that type of thing.
Yeah, and I tend to be a bit of a data nerd, so kind of any chart
We
that you
all
put in
are,
front
don't
of me,
worry.
I would always be like, "Oh, is that interesting? What am I learning out of this?" So yes, for sure, for sure.
So this is a bit left field, but I really wanted to ask you about the role of a CTO. Okay, is it what you expected? And a follow up question to that is, what does a CTO do? What is the most important part of your role, in your opinion?
It is all expected and more. It has really been a fantastic journey. I've learned a lot, and I certainly had a lot of fun. I want to believe I made difference to the business and to my team, and kind of that's been really exciting. So obviously on behalf of Trainline, I drive technical vision and innovation, and then I run tech organization of about 500 engineers. And the bit that I think is most important there is really alignment of what tech org does to the goals of the company. And I know this might
Sure.
sound trivial, but it's actually, I found over the years that it's actually not. It's easy to do the work that's kind of remotely useful, but actually doing the work that's the best work for the companies, I think where kind of a lot of different lies. So I spend quite a lot of my effort to making sure that team, org structure is appropriate, the teams are goaled and aligned in a way that's most likely to yield the results we need them to yield. So, be that cross-functional, kind of across the stack teams that have very
Yeah.
clear metric they're expected to move, or kind of product or strategic goal. Ultimately, that's where my kind of there is a lot to productivity, and there is a lot to building teams, and building out the bench and raising the bar in terms of talent and all that. But ultimately, I think the biggest thing is the alignment.
Yeah, absolutely. I completely, yeah. It's just putting people in the right positions to excel and push the collective forward, isn't it? I mean, that's a brilliant answer. What is your number one piece of productivity advice? How do you stay balanced in your career, Milena, in terms of making sure you don't burn out with all this pressure?
Oh God, number one productivity tip is focus on the things that will make a difference. And, kind of I try to do that every week. Don't drive what you do based on inbox, based on Slack, based on kind of all of these interruptions, and kind of like
Yeah,
everything all these meteors that are hitting you. Kind of be mindful and take a step back every, I do it Monday morning, and think, what is one thing I want to achieve this week? And then I do a very mini version of that every day. If I
yeah,
achieve one thing today, what is that one thing? So just really try to kind of drive things in a proactive way, rather than stay complacent and drown in a sea of, meteors that are kind of hitting you all the time.
sure.
And in terms of burnout, for me, kind of having fun is more important than the rest. Then to kind of like then just kind of resting. And most people will tell you, make sure you get enough sleep and kind of all that. And whereas obviously I appreciate that as well, as mother of a 3-year-old. I do not underestimate the value of sleep at all. However, I just also really try to make time to have fun and do things that are important to me outside of work. And that's where something, be that, go and meet my friends, or go travel, and or just go out and kind of all those things. So for me, the balance in terms of not burning out ends up being around that point of, to not starve myself of the things that make me who I am outside of work.
Yeah, sure. As a female CTO, Milena, it's unfortunately there's still a dramatically low percentage of CTOs certainly in the UK happen to be female, which I know is going in the right direction. But as a CTO, as a female CTO, as a female, part of the leadership team in a major UK business, how optimistic are you that the gender balance is making progress?
It's such an important question. I'm really glad you asked. I have now been in this industry, in the tech industry, that unfortunately has fairly poor representation, possibly worse than kind of many other ones. I have seen the change over the last 10, 15 years. The percentages have moved, and they have moved by modest amount. Like, I'm talking single digit, 1 or 2%. However, it is an improvement. And what has certainly moved, more than the numbers themselves, is the
Mm,
discourse and the narrative, and people's understanding of why this matters, and what
yeah.
we need to do to fix it, and all that. So I'm cautiously hopeful. I do think we need to prepare ourselves for a very long, decades long fight. And if every decade we win an extra 2%, that's fine. It does mean in 50 years we will be in kind of in a, well, somewhere a little bit closer to balance. But it's important to stay focused on it, and just to prepare for kind of long, to stay resilient, and to stay focused on the long fight.
Yeah, no, that's fantastic. I mean, again, we could do an entire podcast on that, couldn't we? But I think, but I really want to get that question in, and yeah, because you are probably looked up to now, and you are setting, an example of mobility for ambitious females in the technology sector. You know what I mean? We need more people coming through like yourself. So, okay, so this is probably my last question. Looking back now over your career, and you've got a long way to go. I understand that, but looking back now, if you were to sort of talk to that person who left university in Serbia all them years ago, what advice would you give to that person, knowing what you know now?
It's being okay with not knowing what's next, because I would always start to get very nervous when people tell me, "Oh, what is your 5 or 10 year career journey?" And I was like, I don't know. I don't know. So I would kind of try to come up with something. Very often, something that doesn't authentically come as kind of as my own option. And most times, I genuinely didn't really know. So something around that where like it's okay not to know. It's okay to take things one step at a time. You don't Not everyone, some people, are totally fine with master plans, but not everyone needs like a 30-year career master plan. Take it step at a time. Allow yourself to be surprised by what you like doing and what you don't like doing, and kind of build from there. Build things one step at a time.
Brilliant advice. Embrace the ambiguous, embrace uncertainty, I suppose, isn't it? You have to take chances, Milena, don't you? You have to put
Exactly.
yourself out there. Fantastic. I've got to ask you this, Milena. We always ask our guests this. Do you have a book? I'm not sure if you're much of a reader, but if not a book, if you're not much of a reader, maybe you could recommend a podcast, a film, movie, or any piece of content you've been inspired by recently. What would you pick?
Oh God, recently, like, it's just, it's kind of, I've
Well,
just been
it
about
can be
to
ever. It doesn't have to be recently. It can be
yeah.
ever.
No, recently it's just been, reading books about parenting toddlers, which is the hardest thing I ever had to do.
Well,
So it's sort of like that's a bit of a different. But no, I think if in a career there have been a few that have really shaped kind of my approach to leadership. I always recommend Sheryl Sandberg's Lean In. That I felt that was the
oh,
one.
yes, we've had that one recommended before. Good book. Sheryl Sandberg, who I believe is the COO at Facebook. Is that correct?
Yeah. She was recently, she moved on, but for very many years she was CEO at Facebook, and I feel it just captured that duality around being a female leadership figure in a world of tech, kind of trying to make a difference, trying to reconcile a lot of different things, being an amazing allies for kind of other underrepresented groups, but equally being super badass in kind of driving progress for the company and and for self and kind of all that. So that was the one that I felt really just allowed me to choose the categories in which I don't need to compete, and just feel at ease with kind of where I am, but equally feel at ease with my own ambition and kind of a lot of
Ambition being a great way to end this podcast, and being super badass as well, as you
Yay.
also alluded to. Milena, I've really enjoyed speaking with you. Where can people find you and find some of the stuff you're doing at Trainline? Are you active on social media platforms? Where can they reach out?
For sure. Yes, absolutely. So on LinkedIn, Trainline's main account posts both about the openings we have right now. We have more than 20 roles open across the company. And that's where we talk about our biggest launches, as well as our internal culture, anything else really that's kind of agenda for the company. So do give Trainline's profile on LinkedIn a follow. And no, I wanted to thank you. I have absolutely enjoyed the chat. Really, really a lot of great topics.
No problem at all. Thank you so much for coming on. So where do we start with that one? It was an absolute joy. I think we could have gone on for so much longer. It really was a very fascinating, value-packed conversation. There's so much to choose from in terms of what I want to draw attention to. But I think the part of the interview which I'd like to draw attention to has to be Milena's thoughts around delegation and successful delegation, and combining the right balance of accountability with obviously effectively communicating the task as well. Milena used an example of training. If you train too heavy or too light, you don't really get any progress. So I think it's in the context of delegating something, you don't want to give the person too much pressure. You don't want to you don't want to give them too little pressure. You want to give them just the right amount of responsibility so that they feel empowered. They feel empowered by the task. And then at that balance point, you have then successfully delegated something so the individual is motivated to do a good job. I thought that was absolutely brilliant. It may be obvious to some people, but I think it's something that so many leaders don't do very well. And I think it's something that so many leaders could benefit from, getting that balance point right. And each individual situation is different, of course. Love that. There were so many other things. I think the female representation in the tech sector, Milena's thoughts about that is obviously still quite embarrassingly low. The gender balance is unfortunately weighted in one direction. I really liked Milena's line. She is cautiously hopeful as to the progress being made there, which I thought was a very good way to put it, and is a sentiment that I share with her as well. Which, again, it was a brilliant part of the interview. Thank you so much for downloading. I hope you enjoyed it. It's Milena Nikolic.
Please subscribe to the Tech Leaders Podcast.
If you found this episode valuable and thought-provoking, we would really appreciate it if you could quite simply click the subscribe button and possibly even leave a review. This helps us to spread the word and reach a wider audience so that we can make a bigger impact and bring you the best guests possible. Thank you so much for downloading.